Good evening. Tonight you may notice my tremor and sometimes funky voice. They are symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and I hope they don't distract you from hearing my talk. Have you ever been uprooted and moved to a new location where you were a complete stranger? Or maybe your experience of being the stranger was a new job or school. Remember what it felt like to be unknown and unaccustomed to your situation. How did you move from being the stranger to being connected? Did someone come alongside and welcome you, or did you have to find your own way? Like many of you, I've had a variety of experiences of being the stranger. I've moved more times than I want to count, lived in 6 countries, and have also lived in large cities to remote villages. In each situation, I needed to put forth an effort to connect, and a handful of situations where I felt some of my deepest connections. There were people in the community who intentionally welcomed me. My most memorable time of being the stranger was after college. That summer, I moved to Belgium to learn French in preparation for teaching biology and chemistry in a Congolese secondary school. I was so grateful to those who stepped up and welcomed me and helped me find my way in this new culture and gave me safe places to process my sometimes difficult transition. The school secretary gave me a new name in the local language. Kasanji, she befriended me without an agenda. She was just there for me. Years later, in Eastern Congo, Esther was a great encouragement to me as I struggled with parenting. We had kids the same ages. We had twins that were 3 and an infant, and she managed to squeeze one more in there. These people who had different stories than mine took the time to see me, to open the door and welcome me, and to know me. They made me feel more at home and less like the stranger. For much of my life, I've had the privilege of welcoming some of the most resilient people I've ever known, refugees. Tonight, I want to challenge you to intentionally welcome these strangers, resettled refugees, into their new communities. A friend of mine, Svetlana, is an ethnic Armenian who became a refugee when she was forced to flee her country of Azerbaijan in the early 90s, when her ethnic group was the target of brutal persecution. A couple years later, she was vetted and resettled into a quiet suburban town in the Midwest. That first week, she and her daughter hunkered down in their apartment, afraid to go outside for fear of being the victim of a violent crime. You see, as in Azerbaijan, that was how the U.S. was portrayed. After that first week, they couldn't take it anymore. So they took a 1-block walk into suburbia and came back unscathed. And each day they did a little bit more. Svetlana chuckled when she told me the story of their unfounded fears when they first moved to the States. But imagine if on that 1-block walk, they had seen a man approaching them on the sidewalk, and they would probably tense up in fear. He notices their apprehension, and so he smiles and nods to them. They relax a little and smile back. He says, "Have a good day," and they understand and reply, "You too." Now, the whole encounter took practically no time and would probably be forgotten by the man. But it could have been, for Svetlana and her daughter, a perspective changer. Not only had they not been accosted, they met someone who was friendly, and they had a all but brief, successful conversation in English. Don't underestimate the power of a smile when welcoming a stranger. The first time I met a refugee was in my junior year of high school in 1975, when I befriended 3 Vietnamese siblings, An, Ben, and Hung. I was just a friendly face that acknowledged them by learning their names and hanging out with them and trying to communicate through sign language and limited English and a lot of smiles. Refugees sometimes feel overlooked and ignored. One Syrian refugee said he felt invisible in high school, as if people could not even see him. Acknowledgement is a way to welcome the stranger. We need to overcome our love of the familiar and initiate that first, potentially awkward conversation with a stranger. We also need to be willing to feel a little foolish as we attempt to learn and pronounce their potentially unfamiliar name correctly. Write it down phonetically and memorize it. They have to learn a whole new language. We can learn a few unfamiliar names. The simple act of acknowledging the stranger by greeting them by name with a smile makes them visible and is the beginning of being known. After college and my 12 years overseas, I returned to the States and I felt lost and disconnected. I needed to rebuild my sense of belonging. I heard about a group of people from my church that were welcoming refugees to our community on Tuesday nights, so I decided to join them. That's when I met Svetlana, who I mentioned earlier. That night, she told me about the terror she felt when she and her daughter were hiding from the mobs that were systematically targeting Armenians. I could empathize with her as I remembered the foul taste of fear from a time of anarchy I experienced in Congo that caused me to evacuate twice to Rwanda with my children. Svetlana and I both felt heard and understood. We empathized with one another. And for me, that was the beginning of rebuilding my sense of belonging here. Maybe for Svetlana too. Empathy is a way to welcome the stranger. At the age of 52, Svetlana's move to the States was not a move of opportunity, but of survival. Leaving her country meant the end of her career as a Russian language and literature teacher for the deaf, separation from her aging non-Armenian husband, and a loss of wealth exemplified by no longer visiting her cottage on the Caspian Sea. Refugee stories are often, like Svetlana's, are often so tragic and different from our own, we may tend to distance ourselves and miss our commonalities. What did you have in common with Svetlana and her daughter? Are you a parent or a child? A teacher? You love literature? You have a cottage? Or you've experienced prejudice or know the pain of loss as well as the joys of life? When we focus on our commonalities, we can come together and bridge the gap that our differences may create, making empathy possible. The simple act of empathy communicates understanding and acceptance, which can lead to a sense of belonging. Currently, I've come full circle and am welcoming Congolese refugees to my community, just like they welcomed me to theirs 38 years ago. A few months ago, a former mentee contacted me out of the blue just to catch up. And it was so good to hear how well she was doing. Her refugee story started at the age of 11 when she was forced to flee her country of Burundi due to ethnic conflict, and she was separated from her family. Now, 16 years later, from resettlement, she is working, she's speaking English, she's driving, advocating for herself, and she is a citizen. She is no longer a stranger. I met her when she arrived in the States, and I came alongside her, and I engaged in the practical by helping her learn the language, go to midwife visits together, and I was just there for her during some very difficult times. Neofita told me she could never forget those who welcomed her when she first came. The simple act of engaging with the practical helps the stranger to navigate their new community, making inclusion a possibility. Welcoming the stranger with acknowledgement, empathy, and engagement can lead to being known, accepted, and included, which psychologists call a sense of well-being, and is included in the list of essential human needs. So, welcoming the stranger is significant and benefits the whole community. So how are you going to squeeze welcoming the stranger into your already busy life? Start with cultivating an attitude of genuine welcome. Many cultures that refugees come from excel in welcoming. Learn the art of welcoming from refugees. Next, welcome the stranger during your routines of life. Welcome the stranger when you're on the job, if you're their landlord or employer or co-worker, teacher, medical professional, caseworker, banker, grocer. You get the idea. Welcome the stranger on the job. And welcome the stranger while doing life. If they live in your neighborhood or go to your kids' school, or they're in your class or lunch period or sports team, or maybe they worship at the same place as you, or you're a customer at their business. Welcome the stranger while doing life. And if your natural inclination is to avoid the newcomer, for whatever reason, I challenge you to at least once try acknowledgement and see what happens. You might be surprised by joy. And if you think, well, there's no refugees in my area, welcome another stranger, such as international students or new immigrants or migrant workers or asylum seekers. Lastly, you can welcome the stranger by formally volunteering through the nearest resettlement agency, literacy council, or language learning program. As a volunteer, you'll come alongside the refugee and help empower them to reach whatever their next goal is, whether it's language learning, finding a job, getting to the doctor, navigating the education system, understanding official mail, or just exploring the community together. Over time, you will see the refugee reach their goal of becoming self-sufficient, contributing citizens that feel at home. The refugee crisis is overwhelming, but our response need not be. I am one person who, over various stages of life, from teenager to grandmother, took the time to took the initiative to welcome one newcomer at a time. It wasn't always exciting or convenient to initiate a new conversation or to slow down enough to see commonalities and empathize, or to engage by introducing new vocabulary, but the benefits to your community, you personally, and the refugee are priceless. The choice is yours. Welcome the stranger.